The silver bracelet cut into my wrist as I gripped the hospital bed rail, watching my daughter's eyes flutter open. "Dad," Sage whispered through split lips. I didn't back down. 3 days earlier, I'd have given anything to hear those words from my 16-year-old daughter. 3 days earlier, before the blood, before the concussion, before I understood what kind of war she'd stumbled into at Westbridge High, before I realized my little girl had inherited more than just my stubborn streak and sharp eyes, she'd inherited my curse of never being able to walk away from the truth, no matter how dangerous it gets. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it really started, not with the violence, but with a simple discrepancy in numbers that most people would have ignored. Most people aren't Sage Holloway. It was Tuesday, October 15th, the kind of crisp New England morning that made Connecticut look like a postcard, all red maple leaves and white church steeples. Nothing like the steel and concrete jungle of Chicago we'd left behind 3 months ago. I remember because Sage texted me that morning, something she rarely did anymore since the divorce. "Dad, something's weird about this school's budget. Remember that trick you taught me about finding patterns in public records?" My chest tightened reading those words, even through a screen, from 200 miles away in my cramped Manhattan office. I could feel trouble brewing. That trick I'd taught her, cross-referencing financial documents to spot inconsistencies, had cost me my career at the Tribune, my marriage, and nearly my life once. But what kind of father would I be if I hadn't passed on the tools of my trade? What kind of journalist would I be if I'd raised my daughter to look the other way? "Be careful, kiddo," I texted back. Sometimes numbers hide things people kill to protect. And let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We love seeing how far these stories travel. Whether you're here for the action, the heart, or both, thank you for being part of this mission. She sent back an eye-roll emoji. 16-year-olds think they're invincible. I used to think that too, before I learned that truth-telling in America comes with a body count. Sage had been sitting in Westbridge High's cafeteria, she told me later, surrounded by the kind of kids who wore designer backpacks that cost more than my monthly office rent. The school newsletter lay spread before her glossy pages, celebrating the new $50 million budget, the state-of-the-art athletic center under construction, the excellence that money could buy. Most kids would have been checking Instagram or talking about whoever was dating whoever. Not my daughter. She was comparing the newsletter's numbers to screenshots on her phone, public budget records she'd pulled from the state's education website the night before, for some essay about school funding inequality. "The math doesn't work," she'd muttered to herself, a habit she'd picked up from watching me work late nights at our kitchen table. Back when we still had a kitchen table we all shared. The reported budget showed $50 million. The state records showed $35 million. $15 million had materialized out of thin air, or more likely, been materialized into something that wasn't quite air. She took a photo of the newsletter, then another of the budget breakdown posted on the cafeteria bulletin board. Such a simple action. Such devastating consequences. From across the cafeteria, Jackson Whitmore watched her with the kind of intensity that prey animals evolve to recognize as danger. 6'3" of pure privilege, wrapped in a Letterman jacket. With the kind of jawline that gets you forgiven for anything in a town like Westbridge. His father ran the school board. His mother controlled the construction contracts. And here was this new girl, this nobody from Chicago taking pictures of numbers that weren't supposed to be questioned. Sage didn't notice him that day. She was too focused on the discrepancy, her mind already working like the investigative journalist she'd dreamed of becoming before our family imploded. She screenshotted everything, made notes in her phone, even circled inconsistencies with her finger on the screen like she'd seen me do 1,000 times with printed documents. That night, she called me. Actually called, not texted. "Dad, I think something's really wrong here. The school's claiming they have $50 million in funding, but the state records show 35.
And get this, there's a whole section about private donations that doesn't appear in any public filing." I was sitting in my office, feet up on a desk held together with duct tape and stubbornness, looking at my own case files: insurance fraud, cheating spouses, the small-time grime that pays the bills when you're blacklisted from real journalism. My daughter's voice pulled me back to who I used to be. "Sage, honey, you need to be careful. This isn't Chicago, small towns. They run on corruption." "Yeah, Dad, I figured that out. But someone should do something about it. Right? That's what you always taught me. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. The truth has its own power. Remember. Remember, how could I forget? Those were the words I'd lived by, the words that had made me a Polk-E Award winner and a pariah in the same career, the words that had made Sage's mother pack her bags, tired of death threats and dead cats on our doorstep. I remember, kiddo, but sometimes the truth comes with a price tag you can't afford to pay. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is that why you stopped? Is that why you gave up journalism?" The question hit like a physical blow. Is that what she thought? That I'd given up? I looked around my office, the water-stained ceiling, the ancient laptop held together with hope and electrical tape, the wall of rejection letters from every major newspaper in the country. I hadn't given up. I'd been exiled, out. I didn't give up. Sage. I just found a different way to search for truth. By spying on cheating husbands, by surviving, by making sure you and your mother were safe, by letting them win. Her voice was flat, disappointed, the same tone her mother had used in our last fight. "You taught me to fight for truth. Dad, was that all just talk?" After she hung up, I stared at my phone for a long time. My daughter was becoming everything I'd raised her to be, and it terrified me, because I knew what happened to people who asked the wrong questions in the wrong places. I'd been one of them. The next morning, Wednesday, Sage made her first real move. She approached Mr. Kowalski, the journalism teacher, during study hall. Kowalski was one of those relics of actual journalism who'd somehow ended up teaching high school graying beard, coffee-stained cardigan, the kind of tired eyes that had seen too many compromises. "Mr. K," she said, sliding into the desk next to his. "Can I ask you something about school funding transparency?" Kowalski's fingers paused over his keyboard. "That's a very specific question, Miss Holloway. I'm writing an essay about education inequality, but I noticed some discrepancies in our school's reported budget versus state records. Is that normal?" The color drained from Kowalski's face like water from a broken dam. He glanced around the empty classroom, then leaned in close. "Sage, I'm going to give you some advice. Drop the essay. Pick a different topic. Maybe something about social media's impact on teenage mental health. Much safer. Much healthier. But if there's something wrong with how public money is being, there's nothing wrong." His voice was sharp now, scared. "Everything at Westbridge is exactly as it should be. Exactly as it's always been. Exactly as it needs to stay. Do you understand me?"
She understood. All right. She understood that Kowalski knew something, and that whatever it was had him terrified. She understood that $15 million doesn't just disappear without leaving tracks. She understood that, in a town like Westbridge, silence was currency and truth was contraband. That afternoon, word had already spread. Small towns have their own nervous system, information flowing faster than fiber optic cables. Jackson Whitmore knew the new girl had been asking questions. His father knew. The network of families who'd fed off Westbridge's bloated budgets for decades knew. Sage was in the library after school, hunched over her laptop, when they found her. Not Jackson, not yet. First came the whispers, the isolation, the tactical strikes designed to make her want to disappear. 3 girls from the cheerleading squad, Jackson's girlfriend Madison and her court, surrounded her table. "So you're the new girl who thinks she's some kind of detective," Madison said, examining her manicured nails like they were the most fascinating thing in the world. "How's that working out for you?" Sage didn't look up from her screen. "Just doing research for an essay." "Research?" Madison drew out the word like it tasted bad. "You know what's funny about research? Sometimes you find things that should stay buried. Sometimes you dig up stuff that makes important people angry. And when important people get angry in Westbridge—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. One of the other girls, I never learned her name, accidentally knocked over Sage's water bottle. It spilled across her keyboard, sending her scrambling to save her laptop. "Oops," the girl said flatly. "Accidents happen, especially to people who don't know when to mind their own business." They left her there, mopping up water with paper towels. Her hands shaking, not with fear but with rage. She texted me that night, "They're trying to scare me off. It's not working." "Maybe it should," I texted back. But even as I sent it, I knew it was useless. She was my daughter. Backing down wasn't in her DNA. Thursday morning came with frost on the windows and ice in the atmosphere at Westbridge High. Sage walked through the halls like a ghost. No one would talk to her, sit with her, even look at her directly. The social exile was complete and surgical. In Chicago, she'd at least had anonymity. Here, she was marked, but she kept digging. During lunch, she sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria, laptop open, cross-referencing construction contracts with school board members' business registrations. The pattern was almost insultingly obvious once you looked for it. Every major contract went to companies owned by board members' families. The Whitmore Construction Group alone had received $40 million in contracts over 8 years, all approved by a board chaired by Jackson's father. She was so absorbed in her research that she didn't notice Jackson approaching until his shadow fell across her screen. "You need to stop," he said quietly. His voice was different from what she'd expected, not threatening, almost pleading. "You don't understand what you're messing with." Sage looked up at him, seeing not the golden boy quarterback, but a scared kid carrying his family's sins. "I understand that your family is stealing from the education budget. I understand that money meant for students is going into your parents' pockets. But you don't understand anything." His jaw clenched. "This isn't some big city newspaper expose. This is how things work here. How they've always worked. My family. The other families we built this town. We maintain it. You steal from it. We survive in it." He leaned in closer, and she could smell his cologne, expensive, sharp, trying too hard to cover something rotten. "Do you know what happens when someone tries to change how things work in Westbridge? Ask Mr. Kowalski about his predecessor. Ask why the last principal retired at 42. Ask why the state auditor's office never finds anything wrong here. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to save you. For a moment, his mask slipped, and she saw genuine fear in his eyes. My father. He's not a forgiving man. Neither are the others. They've worked too hard to build this system to let some nobody from Chicago tear it down. Please, just stop. Write about something else. Graduate, leave, live your life somewhere else. Like you're going to do, run off to USC on your football scholarship and pretend none of this happened. His face hardened. Yes, exactly like that, because I'm smart enough to know when a fight isn't worth winning. Then you're not as smart as you think. She turned back to her laptop, dismissing him. It was a mistake, the kind of misreading of a situation that comes from growing up in a place where the worst thing that happens is someone keys your car. She didn't understand that in Westbridge. Dismissing a Whitmore was like slapping a king in his own court. Jackson stood there for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, resignation. Maybe. Or the kind of anger that comes from being cornered. I tried, he said quietly. Remember that. When this goes bad, remember that I tried to warn you. He walked away, and Sage went back to her research, not knowing she'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She found more that afternoon: shell companies, inflated invoices, a web of financial manipulation that would have made a federal prosecutor salivate. Every document she saved to her encrypted cloud drive was another nail in someone's coffin. The attack came after school, in the nearly empty hallway outside the journalism classroom. Sage had stayed late, uploading files and organizing evidence. The school was that quiet kind of empty that amplifies every sound her footsteps echoed as she walked toward her locker, laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She heard them before she saw them, multiple sets of footsteps falling into rhythm behind her. Not running, not hurrying, just walking with the steady certainty of predators who know their prey has nowhere to go. Hey, Chicago. Jackson's voice was different now.
Gone was the pleading tone from lunch, replaced by something harder and more desperate. She turned to find him flanked by 3 other football players' guys whose names she didn't know, but whose faces she recognized from the trophy case photos. Champions, heroes, good boys from good families. We need to talk, Jackson said. So talk. She kept her voice steady, but her hand tightened on her laptop bag. Everything was on that laptop, weeks of research. Evidence that could bring down half the power structure of Westbridge. You didn't listen. I asked nicely. I tried to help you, but you just kept digging. Didn't you? He stepped closer, and his friends spread out, blocking any escape route. Do you know what you've done? My father got a call today. Someone at the state education department received an anonymous tip about budget irregularities. Was that you? It wasn't. Sage hadn't gone that far yet, but someone had. Maybe Kowalski, finally finding his courage. Maybe someone else tired of the corruption. But the who didn't matter now, because Jackson had already decided she was guilty. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Liar. The word came out like a slap. You think you're so smart. You think you're some kind of hero, like your washed-up father playing detective in his sad little office. The mention of her father made her blood burn. Don't talk about my dad. Why not everyone knows about him? The great Atticus Holloway, who thought he could take on the Chicago machine and got crushed. Blacklisted, divorced, reduced to taking pictures of cheating husbands. Jackson smiled, but it was all teeth and no warmth.
Like father, like daughter. Except you're not even smart enough to know when you're beat. The truth doesn't get beat, Sage said, echoing her father's words. It just waits for its moment. That's when Jackson laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that bounced off the empty hallway walls. The truth. You want to know the truth? The truth is that my family owns this town. The truth is that we decide who succeeds and who fails. The truth is that you're nobody. From nowhere. And after today, you're going to wish you'd stayed nobody. He moved fast, faster than she expected from someone his size. His hands grabbed her shoulders, spinning her around. And suddenly the wall was rushing toward her face. She had just enough time to turn her head, trying to protect her face. Before impact. The sound was wrong. That's what she'd remember later, not the pain, not the fear, but the sound. A sick, wet crunch as the side of her head met the cinder block wall, with all of Jackson's quarterback strength behind it. The world exploded into stars and darkness. She felt her legs give out, felt the laptop bag slip from her shoulder, somewhere far away. She heard voices panic, creeping into their tones as they realized what they'd done. Jesus! Jax, you hit her too hard. Shut up! She's fine. She's faking it. But she wasn't faking the blood that was pooling beneath her head, stark red against the institutional gray floor. Wasn't faking the way her body had gone limp, puppet strings cut. Wasn't faking the way her eyes had rolled back, showing only white. "We need to get out of here," one of them said. "Someone's coming." Footsteps running away. The squeak of sneakers on polished floors. Then silence, except for the buzz of fluorescent lights and the sound of her labored breathing. She wasn't unconscious, not quite. She existed in that gray space between aware and gone, where thoughts move like molasses and pain is just another piece of information. She could taste copper in her mouth, could feel warmth spreading beneath her head, could hear, as if from very far away, someone screaming her name. Mr. Wojciechowski, the janitor, found her. He'd been a paramedic in Poland before immigration had reduced him to pushing mops in American high schools. His trained hands held her head steady while he called 911, his accented voice calm and precise as he described her injuries. "Stay with me, Jekko," he murmured. "Help is coming. Your father is coming." My father. The thought floated through her fading consciousness like a life preserver. Dad would come. Dad would know what to do. Dad always knew what to do with bullies and corruption, and the kind of men who thought violence could bury truth. As the sirens grew closer, as her vision narrowed to a pinpoint of light, Sage Holloway smiled, because she'd uploaded everything to the cloud before they found her, because the truth was already beyond their reach, waiting on a server they'd never find. Because sometimes the best stories, the most important stories, are written in blood. She closed her eyes and let the darkness take her, not knowing that 3 hours later, I'd be breaking speed limits and probably several laws racing from Manhattan to Connecticut, not knowing that her story, our story, was just beginning, not knowing that sometimes, when bullies smash your head against a wall, they wake up something far more dangerous than a teenage girl with a laptop. They wake up her father. The call came at 9:47 p.m. I know because I'd been staring at my watch, waiting for a client to show up for a surveillance job, another cheating spouse, another paycheck to keep the lights on. When I saw Westbridge General Hospital on my phone screen, my blood turned to ice water. "Mr. Holloway." This is Dr. Sarah Chen at Westbridge General. Your daughter Sage has been admitted with a head injury. I don't remember the rest of the conversation. Don't remember grabbing my keys or running to my beat-up Honda. Don't remember the drive from Manhattan to Connecticut. Though I must have made it in record time because the timestamp on the hospital parking garage shows 11:23 p.m. What I remember is the taste of fear, metallic and thick, like blood in my mouth. The ICU was too bright, too clean, too full of machines making sounds I didn't want to understand. And there, in the middle of it all, was my little girl. Bandages wrapped around her head, face swollen and bruised, looking so small in that hospital bed. "Dad?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I crossed to her bed in 2 strides, taking her hand carefully, afraid I might break her. "I'm here, kiddo. I'm here." I didn't back down. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. "Just like you taught me. I didn't back down." "I know, baby. I know." I smoothed her hair away from her face, careful of the bandages. "What happened? Who did this?" The story came out in pieces between pain medication and tears. Jackson Whitmore. The budget discrepancies, the threats, the attack. As she spoke, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the cold, focused rage that had made me one of the best investigative journalists in Chicago. The kind of rage that doesn't burn hot, but freezes everything else out until only the mission remains. "Dad, I have everything backed up, every document, every discrepancy. It's all in the cloud." She squeezed my hand weakly. "They thought destroying my laptop would stop me. But you taught me better than that. Where's your laptop now? The police have it, or what's left of it." Jackson stomped on it after. She touched her bandages gingerly. "And the police, what are they doing?" Her laugh was bitter. Too old for 16. "The detective who came by, Detective Morrison, he said it was unfortunate, but without witnesses or security footage. It's my word against theirs. And guess whose family donates to the Police Benevolent Association? Of course, in towns like Westbridge, corruption didn't stop at the school board. It was an ecosystem of mutual benefit and assured destruction for anyone who threatened it." "The security cameras?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Mysteriously malfunctioning. The principal, Dr. Reeves, came by earlier. She was very sorry about my accident and hoped I'd make a full recovery. She also mentioned that, given the trauma, maybe I'd be happier at a different school, somewhere with a more suitable environment." I stood up slowly, my joints creaking from too many years of sitting in cars doing surveillance. "Get some rest, kiddo. I need to make some calls." "Dad, what are you going to do?" I looked at my daughter, brilliant, brave, broken, because she'd done exactly what I'd taught her to do. What I should have done a long time ago. I'm going to finish the story. The next morning, I set up shop in a motel room that smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams, but it had Wi-Fi. And that was all I needed. First, I accessed Sage's cloud storage. She'd given me the password. And what I found there made my journalist's heart sing. Financial documents, contracts, emails. She'd been thorough, meticulous, professional. My daughter had built a federal case without even knowing it. But we needed more. In my experience, financial corruption was like cockroaches for every one you saw. There were 100 hidden in the walls, so I started making calls to contacts I hadn't spoken to in years. FBI agents who'd worked with me on corruption cases. Forensic accountants who could spot laundered money in their sleep. Other journalists who'd been pushed out but never stopped hunting for truth. "Atticus Holloway," came a familiar voice when my third call connected. "I thought you were out of the game." "Hey, Maria. Turns out the game followed me to Connecticut. You still at the Bureau?" Maria Santos had been my best source during my investigation into Chicago construction kickbacks. The story that had ended my career when I wouldn't reveal her as my source. She'd tried to protect me, but I'd protected her instead. It had cost me everything, but kept her badge intact. "Still fighting the good fight. What's going on?" I told her about Westbridge, about the missing $15 million, about what they'd done to Sage. The line was quiet for a long moment. "School construction corruption in Connecticut, Atticus. We've been building a case on that for 2 years. Different districts, but same pattern. Shell companies, inflated invoices, board members getting rich while schools fall apart. You might have just found our missing piece. You have an active investigation, RICO case, racketeering charges. We think it goes all the way up to state level, but we haven't been able to crack the local networks. They're too insular, too protected. But if your daughter has what you say she has everything. Names, numbers, connections. Maria, they hurt my kid." "I know." Her voice softened. "Email me everything. Encrypted. You remember how I did. Some skills you never forget. While I worked with Maria, Sage was fighting her own battle from her hospital bed. The concussion was mild, the doctors said, but she'd need observation for a few days. That didn't stop her from using her phone to document everything. She recorded conversations with nurses who whispered about how those Whitmore boys always get away with it. She screenshotted social media posts from students who'd seen the aftermath but were too scared to speak up. And then, on day 2, we got our first break. Mr. Wojciechowski, the janitor who'd found Sage, came to visit. He brought flowers, white roses that seemed too pure for the ugliness of why we were there, and something else. "I have been waiting," he said in his careful, accented English, "for someone brave enough to see." He pulled out a thick manila envelope from inside his jacket. 10 years I work at this school. 10 years I watch them steal. I keep copies of everything. Receipts they throw away. Invoices with 2 different numbers. Emails printed from computers they think I don't know how to use. He set the envelope on Sage's bedside table like he was placing a holy relic. "Once, I tried to tell someone I go to state auditor next week. I am janitor instead of assistant facilities manager. They say my English not good enough for management. But I keep collecting, waiting." Sage reached for the envelope with shaking hands. "Why didn't you?" "Because I have family. Children who need father with job. Not father who is martyr. But you." He looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. "You are young. You have father who knows how to fight. Maybe now is time." The envelope was a gold mine. Wojciechowski had been methodical, documenting not just financial discrepancies but conversations, meetings, patterns of behavior that painted a picture of systematic corruption going back a decade. Combined with Sage's digital evidence and my FBI contact, we had enough to bury them all. But the Whitmores weren't going down without a fight. The counterattack started 2 days later. The morning Sage was released from the hospital. First came the lawyers, a team from Hartford's most expensive firm, serving us with papers for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They were seeking $10 million in damages and an immediate injunction against releasing any documents related to the school board. "This is intimidation," I told Sage as we sat in our motel room. Legal papers spread across the bed. They're trying to scare us into silence. Is it working? She asked. But she was already uploading files to her TikTok account, adding her own narration about what had happened. The first video, her, in a hospital bed, explaining why she was there, got 100,000 views in an hour. Then came the harassment. My motel room phone rang at all hours with threatening calls. Someone keyed my car in the parking lot, leaving a note, "Leave town or leave in a bag." The principal called to inform us that Sage was suspended, pending an investigation into her disruptive behavior. But for every attack, we found an ally. Students started reaching out, sharing their own stories of the Whitmore family's behavior. Teachers who'd been too scared to speak up began forwarding emails. Parents who'd questioned budget numbers only to be shut down came forward with documentation. The school board called an emergency meeting for Friday night, trying to bury it when most people would be at football games or home with their families. They didn't count on Sage's TikTok army showing up. They didn't count on me inviting Maria Santos and her FBI team. They definitely didn't count on Sage live streaming the whole thing. The Westbridge High Auditorium was packed. School board members sat on stage looking like they were facing a firing squad. Richard Whitmore, Jackson's father, held the gavel like a weapon. This meeting is to address the baseless allegations being spread by certain individuals. You mean the $15 million missing from the school budget? I stood up, my voice carrying in the silence that followed. Or the shell companies funneling construction contracts to board members' families. Or maybe you want to address why your son put my daughter in the hospital for asking questions. You have no proof. Actually, we do. Maria Santos stood up, badge visible. FBI, Mr. Whitmore, we have warrants for your financial records, your company's records, and your communications. We also have warrants for 6 other board members. The auditorium erupted, parents shouting questions, reporters, real ones who'd driven up from Hartford and Boston, pushing forward with cameras. And through it all, Sage kept her phone steady, broadcasting live to 2 million viewers and climbing. "This is what corruption looks like," she said to her camera. "This is what happens when good people stay quiet too long. But we don't have to stay quiet anymore." Jackson was in the audience with his mother. His father had told him to stay home. But teenage arrogance won out when the FBI agents started moving through the crowd with warrants. He stood up. This is her fault," he pointed at Sage. "None of this would have happened if she'd just minded her own business." "No," I said, moving to stand beside my daughter. "This happened because you thought violence could hide the truth. Because your family thought money could buy silence. Because this whole town taught you that might make right. But you forgot something important." "What's that?" Richard Whitmore's voice was cold, controlled even as his world burned. "You forgot that broken things can be sharp, and nothing's more dangerous than someone with nothing left to lose." The arrests happened fast after that. Richard Whitmore for racketeering and money laundering, his wife for fraud, 4 other board members for various financial crimes. The construction company's offices were raided that night. Boxes of evidence hauled out while news cameras rolled. Jackson wasn't arrested that night. Assault charges would come later, after witness statements were properly collected. But I'll never forget his face as they led his father away in handcuffs. The Golden Boy armor cracked, showing the scared kid underneath who'd been taught that corruption was just how the world worked. "I tried to warn her," he said to no one in particular. "I tried to make her stop." "You tried to protect the lie," Sage said quietly. "That's not the same thing." The aftermath was swift and brutal. The entire school board resigned. The state took over Westbridge High's administration. Millions in stolen funds were recovered and earmarked for actual education. The construction contracts were voided. The half-built athletic center suspended pending investigation. But the real change came from the students. Inspired by Sage's courage, they formed an independent newspaper, the Westbridge Truth, with full protection under a hastily passed Student Journalism Protection Act. They investigated everything from cafeteria contracts to college admission statistics. They became the watchdogs their parents had failed to be. 3 weeks after the hospital, after the arrests, after the dust began to settle, Sage and I sat in a diner off Route 9. It was the kind of place that still had vinyl booths and coffee that could strip paint, where the pie was homemade and the gossip was free. "You know, Mom called," Sage said, spinning her coffee cup in its saucer. "She saw the news coverage, said she was proud of me. She should be. She also said, I'm too much like you, that I'll end up bitter and alone, fighting battles that can't be won." I thought about that for a moment, about the price of truth-telling, about what I'd lost and what I'd kept, about the daughter across from me who'd faced down an entire corrupt system and won. Maybe she's right. Maybe we are too alike. But you know what? The world needs people like us. People who can't walk away from wrong. People who believe truth matters more than comfort. Sage touched the fading bruise on her temple. Then the silver bracelet on her wrist, the one inscribed with Veritas I'd given her years ago. "Dad, do you regret it? Everything you lost for your stories." I looked at my daughter, brilliant, brave, unbroken, despite everything they'd tried to do to her. "I regret a lot of things, kiddo, but teaching you to fight for truth, never. Not for a second. Even though it cost you everything. It didn't cost me everything. It gave me you. And you just proved that truth still has power. That one person can still make a difference. That's worth more than any career." She smiled then, and for a moment I saw not the traumatized teenager or the crusading journalist, but my little girl who used to sit on my lap while I worked, asking endless questions about why stories mattered. "So what's next?" she asked. "Back to insurance fraud and cheating spouses." "Actually," I said, pulling out a letter I'd received that morning. "The Boston Globe called. They're starting a new investigative unit focused on municipal corruption. They need someone with experience and, apparently, a 16-year-old daughter who's become the face of student journalism." Her eyes widened. "You're going back to real journalism." "We're going back. If you want. They offered you a junior internship for next summer, paid, with full benefits and a scholarship program for Columbia J School." She was quiet for a long moment, processing. "Then, what about Westbridge, the paper? Everything we started here, change doesn't stop when the leaders leave. You lit a fire, Sage, others will tend it. But there are other towns, other corruption, other truths waiting to be told. The question is, are you ready for the next fight?" She raised her coffee cup, that determined glint back in her eyes. "To the next fight." We clinked cups, ceramic against ceramic, the sound ringing like a bell in the quiet diner. Outside, November wind scattered leaves across the parking lot, each one a small ending that made room for new beginnings. The Westbridge scandal would make textbooks eventually. Criminal justice courses would study the FBI's takedown. Journalism schools would teach Sage's story as an example of citizen reporting in the digital age. But sitting in that diner, we weren't thinking about legacy or lessons. We were just a father and daughter who'd learned that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones worth fighting. And sometimes, when bullies smash your head against a wall, they don't destroy you, they forge you into something harder, something sharper, something unbreakable.